Hello, and welcome back to Talent Thrives Here, our podcast where we talk to people managing people. Are you at a company going through a challenging and very dynamic time right now? The water's choppy. It's hard to know how to communicate to your employees, stakeholders, team members, and what the best plan or plans forward look like. Enter our guest today, Joaquin Aslan, a consultant with a rich background in managing companies through rocky times. Think of the smoke jumper, parachuting into a situation when things are on fire. He has to turn things around in a startup environment, even if that startup is inside a large organization. He will fix things, get them turned around, and then be off to fight another fire. Joaquin, welcome to our show.
Hi, thank you, Lance. It's my pleasure to be here.
Great. Joaquin, can you give our listeners a bit about your skill set and how you best plug into companies going through challenging times?
Sure. So, if you think about your metaphor, smoke jumping, a couple of things that have served me well over time is one, a gift of discernment. So, you have to kind of know jumping in, even without all the details, what the lay of the land is most likely to look like. So, you have to have the ability to kind of see forward, knowing the situations, what the actual dynamic is. Um, it also helps if you have sort of an extreme pattern recognition so that you can observe in the moment how things are unfolding, how they're coming together, what's likely to come about next. So those kinds of skills are important. What I've found, though, that it's really useful to have is listening, collaboration, and empathy. Because no matter what you try to learn or observe on your way in, from 10,000 to 5,000 to 2 feet, you won't know in an intimate way what the people who are already in the throes of it know. So to be able to get that information out of them quickly, accurately, and to piece that together into a cohesive story is a really important skill set for me.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. I recently had an executive who was looking at getting into another role at a new company, and he was asking me a lot of questions about whether it's a good company to work for, and had I heard anything, and rumors, and so on. And to your point, I said to him that the challenge is getting the story behind the story, and I said there's a number of things I often look for, and you probably do too. Is what's the executive team's sort of published mandate, and then what's really going on sort of behind the curtain, and what are the personalities involved? What's the, I often call it the corporate DNA. What's the vision and what are the roadblocks behind that vision? Because those aren't published and no one's going to talk about them other than, in a closed door meeting probably. And that's when, if I'm bringing you in, we probably have to have that meeting. Here's what's really happening. Here's what the war we're really fighting is. Does that make sense?
Well, you're so right. And not only is it, and that's when everyone is being a right actor. Even when
Right.
everyone is doing the right thing, they're telling a story that is flawed to the extent that their ability to tell it is imperfect, their ability to perceive it is imperfect, their audience hearing of it was maybe not quite 100% accurate. So even when everyone's doing the right thing, you end up with some distortion. Now,
Right.
insert in there some people who aren't trying to do the right thing. They're
Yes. Yeah.
subversive to the vision. They're an alternate agenda. They have politics against the person who's speaking. And then you really have to be able to discern, okay, in all that noise, what is most likely the actual mosaic of truth?
Right. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and I'm glad you brought up that sort of the actors and the players because that's generally uh, part of the mix of the challenges or competing mandates, right? Someone's trying to get the attention of the CEO, so they're putting up. There's sort of sometimes I often call it like a building small brush fires to distract people,
Yeah.
politically, and saying I think the problem's really over here when they're deflecting from something else. And this is not healthy for the organization. But I don't know if you found it. I find a lot of organizations behind the curtain. There's something like this going on where the whole team's not really aligned.
Well, I've been I did employee relations for a number of years, and I've done hundreds of investigations, hundreds of interventions where you're interviewing people. And I'm going to tell you a statistic that is probably why I exited that field in particular. About half the time, Lance, you don't have enough information to take certain aggressive action. You're not able
Right.
to prove from an evidentiary standpoint or from corroboration of stories enough happened that you can take certain action. And then about half the time when you can prove sort of what happened, half of that time, it's the complainant that was the problem.
Right.
It was the person who hurled themselves down the stairs on
Right.
the way out of their termination meeting because they wanted a
Yeah.
workers' comp claim rather than a termination.
Yeah.
And it's not rare. It's half of the time you can confirm, which is half of the total. It's actually quite
Yeah.
often.
Yeah, that's a very interesting stat, 50%, and I wouldn't dispute it for a second. And I can think of a recent termination I know of where the company offered a fairly robust package. You know, we're terminating you, but here's the package. Here's your
Hmm.
option to take this extra compensation and extra benefits coverage and so on. And the person didn't take it. And I said to the management team that was asking me, like, why wouldn't they take it? I'm like, something's coming. Something's got there's no way that person would walk away from that extra money unless there was something else to be had. So sure enough, about 4 weeks later, letter from a lawyer, much bigger demand. And I said, there you go. Now, now we know why there was some confusion on the exit. There's a potential lawsuit and
Obviously,
bringing
it'd
up.
be unethical for me to advise that for an organization that I was part of. But with my friends and colleagues, where I'm not party to the investigation or the entity involved, I have advised people not to take those agreements for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah,
Sometimes they're not enough, they're always negotiable, or they're almost always negotiable.
right.
Or sometimes their fact situation is such that you don't want to fritter that away on a thin agreement.
No, I totally agree with you, and I've done similar. I've been in that spot where sometimes I'm either terminating people or advising people on from that same spot.
Mhm.
And my little general term somebody told me a million years ago is there any wiggle room on this agreement? Just to sort of see if they'll enrich it by even a few weeks or a month or two or whatever.
Mhm.
Because if they do, then there's no reason to really get the lawyer involved. But if and you know this, if people don't understand their legal rights, it is good to go seek counsel.
Mhm.
And because an employment lawyer or a labor lawyer will probably quickly look at the agreement in about 5 seconds and go, that paragraph right there, that's where we, point our flag in the hill. And let's talk about that and see what they do with that. Does that make sense, Joaquin?
It does, and it made me reflect on the unfortunate part of that whole kind of universe is it's based on damages. What is the likely level of damages I'm likely to receive because of this claim? Do I have facts that align to a sustainable version of that claim? What will that check look like? So then your attorney says, what does one or two-thirds of that check look like to me? Here's the problem for the workaday folks like myself. My salary alone times damages
Mm,
may not result in a number that's big enough for them to bother with. And
right.
so then you have to follow up with county resources, state resources, federal resources, and try to get some advocacy that way. But a lot of people say, oh, well, I'll just go to a lawyer. And it's much more complicated and expensive than that. So when you're weighing an agreement, weigh all of those facts.
Right. No, good comments. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think the laws, as you know, probably different by state. So,
Hmm.
some states have more protections for certain classifications or categories, and they would like publish those. So, yeah, you're going to be depending on what state you're working for. I've also done ones where we've got a company across several borders, and the termination agreements are completely different from country to country, as
Oh,
are the laws. So, they're very specific to that region. And I've seen other ones where there was some major challenges a few times against the agreement. And you have to be very careful and look through because one of the clauses often will say if there's a dispute, it has to be argued in
arbitrated.
court, yes, in this location. And,
Mhm.
the location could be way far away from where you actually are.
Right.
And so that means, if they really stick to their guns on the agreement, then you're going to have to be flying back and forth and getting a litigator in that state and, or that country. So yeah, it's the value. Are we going to get into this, and what's to be won at the outset? or if this goes successfully, how much is it worth our time? What's the ROI on this whole conversation, really? Does that make
Well, I'm
sense?
from Texas. You'll probably edit this later, but my phrase, being from Texas, grew up on a chicken farm,
Yeah.
is poop to worth. The poop to worth ratio has to be worth it before
Yeah.
you'll take on certain kinds of activities. And if it's not, then it's just not.
No,
Some
that's
people.
it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear it. I hear it. So, okay, wonder if you could give us a story, if you can, about a project you've worked on and how you had to come in and some of the things you had to do. If you can you relate a story like that without sort of exposing too many
Mhm.
companies or some that you could talk about?
I can. Is it your preference on this podcast that I use brand names or that I obscure them? It's a public
Y-
story,
Yeah,
but
no, well, that's it. If it's a public story and if you can share things without getting yourself in trouble, that'd be great.
so I wasn't yet working for, but there was a major hospitality company, and their flagship hotel brand enjoyed a 2-to-1 preference over its next closest competitor. Now that's extraordinary. Your next closest competitor, you are twice as preferred as they are, or had been. By the time that I got there, they were down to parity. So people were like, "Nah, I'll take one, I'll take the other."
Yeah.
But the economic cycle at the time was such that people were not managers, owners were not really willing to spend a lot of money on product, case goods, things that can get very expensive when you're thinking about remodeling or revamping a hotel brand. And so they said, well, wait a minute, maybe we can do this with our people, with just culture. And that's what I was hired for. I was hired for running the people and culture piece of an overall effort to turn around this brand and have it kind of lift back up to where it had been. So what I did is something that I always do in these situations. I never recommend, smoke jumper or not, never hit the ground running. If you hit the ground running, you stand a 359-degree chance of running the wrong direction.
Mm,
Do some kind of discovery when you hit the ground, figure out where you're headed, and then take off.
okay.
So what I did was a bit of discovery at the front end. Take your word for it, preferences slipped, but why? So I literally traveled the world twice. Once westward, leaving from Atlanta all the way back around through San Diego, doing investigations like qualitative investigations where we ask people what's going on, what's going right, what do you like, what don't you like, and their current presentation to customer service came on this card that they kept in their pocket, right? And it had all these elements on it, something like 21 different elements of service. And that's how you can win the guest over. Now, my mind, I think 21 elements of service, I can't even think of like four things at a given time. And so what I know from that is if I'm walking down the hall as a house person and a guest is coming towards me, what I don't do is run through a framework of 21 different decision-making
Right.
ideas. I
Sure.
so
Yeah.
therefore make it up for myself. So you have a
Right.
building of people who are making it up for themselves. And while
Right.
they all may be doing excellence, they're doing 125 different versions of excellence, which is not a brand. It's a
Right.
crowd. So what we did was we peeled that down to three. We tested it in various markets, domestically and foreign. And then I went the other direction around the world, deploying it into various pinnacle hotels per market. So Shanghai, Bangkok, there's some places in Latin America. Atlanta was one, and just to see how it floated, and it went really well. And so we then deployed it out. We created all the materials that go with deploying that out virtually, because I can't show up to 10,000 hotels worldwide. So we created the content, shipped it out, and got everybody on board to this new system that we call the art of hosting, which if
Right.
you've been to one of these hotels recently in the last 5, 6 years, you will have experienced the art of hosting.
Hmm.
But it started with this crisis of, oh my goodness, we're losing parity against our customer. We have limited funds. What can we do? And it was the one time in my life where we had the resources, the time, and the leadership commitment to prove, did this do anything for us financially? So most trainers will talk about evaluation mechanisms and they'll try to say three and four came together. Typically, they don't know. There's a swag and they made it up and they divided it by something. We actually got PhD holding mathematicians, economists, and they worked it out that the hotels that deployed this program did experience a meaningful financial lift.
Right. Right. Great.
So it was really quite extraordinary.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's amazing when those things tie together when you can actually track an ROI on because otherwise it's a lot of pretty words on a on
And I
some
don't mean to
marketing
disparage
materials.
where that's happened in the past. It's just a super dirty number. It's hard to get at.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's why people struggle for it. It's not they don't want to, but we
Yeah.
were able to tease out a lot of the variables that made it clear
Right.
that we did help.
Well, and like I find marketing and HR programs, learning and development, any of those, um, where the CFO can't track an actual stat above or below the line, sometimes is the real challenge. How do I quantify and qualify that this is actually, rubber meet the road sort of thing, or as you said, what was it, chicken in the dirt? Because poop in the dirt.
HR people have been given a free pass by a lot of leaders for a while around, well, does this feel good? Does it sound right?
Yeah.
Am I no longer smelling smoke? So one of the indicators of whether or not something needs to be done in HR is
Yeah.
people feel the pain. So you
Yeah.
do some stuff until the pain is no longer visceral and you think you've won. But it's really absent a lot of the kind of operational math you would
Yeah.
look for if you were investing in any other category of the business.
Yeah.
That I think is coming around.
Well, I think, I mean, I know a couple of executive teams I've worked with where the CFO is holding the purse strings, and there's absolutely no way he or she is going to invest in something unless they can prove it because they're going to get dragged out in front of the board at some point, or, their heads on the block too if they've greenlit something and they can't prove the ROI.
Right.
CFOs generally lose sleep over this because potentially the politics or the lens, the optics that are put on them that they allowed this program to be financed and they don't have handles on it. They can't really prove, which is not a great place for a CFO to be.
I'm a fan of that because everyone in the building is my colleague and probably my friend. I want
Right.
everyone to succeed. By succeeding together, this whole ship moves along better and we all do
Yeah.
well. So I'm not out to sabotage. I'm not out to sabotage anyone. So I know when I ask for a dollar, do you know what my CEO has to do? They have to go take that dollar from somebody else or
Right.
will
Oh,
themselves to have it not show up in the bottom line. It
right.
doesn't just materialize. So
Yeah.
knowing that I'm very careful about how is this going to have a multiplier effect? How is it going to be worth more than it cost?
Yeah. Fair comments. All good. 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 Well, Joaquin, I'm just conscious of the time. You and I live in an ADHD kind of world, and I think some of our listeners may have run off to do groceries or something, as much as they might love the conversation. So I'd love to have you back at some point and dig in a little deeper on a few other topics because there's lots of things going on in this world that you and I live in right now. My main point right now is if people want to find you, I'm sure they can go on to LinkedIn, but is there anywhere else you want them to reach out if they have a need?
The easiest way to remember it is to just go to LinkedIn and it's my name, Joaquin
Okay,
Aslan, Aslan, and I will pop right up. And if you DM me or reach out to me, I'm happy to help you in any way that I can.
great. Excellent. I appreciate that. Thank you again for being on the show. Really appreciate it. Great meeting you. And like I said, hopefully we can dig in maybe at a later date on some other topics as well.
I'd love that. It's been wonderful. Thank you. All the best.
Thank you. All right, great.